Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I am Rob H, filling in for Tom Andry, who is away today for no reason other than the weather. Like, literally, the weather is really bad. But I am Rob H, and I am here with.
Lee Overstreet. The weather is cold but nice here, so I'm filling in for you, I guess.
Yep, that's the way it goes. I moved up the ladder, you came in one
I,
rung below
I step
me.
up. I'm pinch hitting. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. Can I just tell you that Rob called me while I was brushing my teeth like
Uh-huh.
2 hours ago
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Can you do the show?"
We gave Lee so much notice and so much time to prepare.
Sure.
So, yeah,
Uh,
well,
I
actually,
I am known as Captain Winging It.
no kidding. We
I
do
can wing
really,
it.
really need to thank you because you have been basically, we basically placed Lee on retainer to be
Right.
like, we have no idea what our schedules are going to be, so hopefully you will just fill in at a moment's notice as though you have absolutely nothing better to do with your life on a Tuesday night.
Well, I was just going to sit on the couch and watch TV with the wife. That's fun, but she understands. So,
Yes.
this is cool. Now, you say I'm on retainer, but I can't charge you the lawyer retainer fees, unfortunately.
Nope, nope, you definitely can't.
Get
But
nothing
maybe
like that.
one day, thanks to listeners of the week, maybe one day we will be able to pay people something. And speaking of listeners of the week, we have some folks to thank. Now, I have to thank first of all Michael R, who literally came in under the wire, like just before we were about to press record, into
Ah,
his donation. Now, you can donate to this podcast by going to avrant.com. Over on the right hand side, there is a link there saying buy us a cup of coffee. That is just a metaphor for giving us a PayPal donation. And don't worry, you don't actually have to have a PayPal account. You can just use a credit card. It's a link to send a donation one time thing because we're really not fancy here with like
no.
subscriptions or anything or Amazon
But
affiliate
if you
programs.
are a
But
coffee enthusiast, by the way, I love some coffee. So you could
yes.
actually buy me coffee. That would be fine.
Oh, okay. Send it over to Lee.
Counterculture coffee out of North Carolina. Good stuff.
But Michael donated to the podcast right before we started, so thank you so much for that. We also have other listeners of the week because listeners of the week are not just people who donate, they're also people who support the podcast in any major way, such as Everett L. He reached out to Denon and Accessories for Less. He let them know that he bought his AVR X4000 receiver from Denon because of AV Rant, and that answers the question of what Everett decided to do because we talked
Right.
about Everett's question last week. He was wondering if he should get an X4000 or wait, save up, get an X4100. So we kind of know the outcome of that story. He has an X4000 on the way.
The
I'm
official
sure
receiver of AV Rant.
almost, isn't it? It's kind of crazy. I don't have one. It's really just Tom. I mean, this is Tom's show, so whatever Tom has,
Well, it's a
that's the
good
official
starting
gear.
point when you're talking about receivers with people, right? It's a good like just so we all know what we're talking about and we can compare everything else to it. It may as well use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really great feature set, and hopefully it'll be around for a little while longer because the price for features is fantastic on that one.
Hmm.
But moving along, Andy, he posted a review over on SVS's website of the SVS PB2000 subwoofer. He bought one of those because of AV Rant and
There you
gave a
go.
shout out in his review. Very nice. Thank you, Andy. And Carl E. He let SVS know that he purchased his PB2000 subwoofer because of AV Rant. So we're moving a lot of those 2000 series units. That's
SVS, the official subwoofer of AV Rant.
if only it were genuinely official. Who was it? Somebody wrote us an email, and I forgot to put it in the rundown. He was like, I get tired of all the SVS pimping, and believe
Yeah,
me,
well.
it's like it has nothing to do with like we're not being paid by SVS in
No,
any
right.
way.
Well, again, I just, as a listener and an occasional participant, I see it as you guys are using that as kind of another starting point. That's a reference point, right?
Sure.
So we're going to
Yeah.
use that as a good example every time we're talking about subwoofers and then compare other things to it. So we got to have some place where we all can look at something and know what we're talking about.
Exactly. I
So
think the
that's how
thing
I
is,
see it.
I think sometimes people get a little frustrated when they hear the same products mentioned over and over again. Because I mean, if nothing else, it's just a little bit boring on like a podcast to only hear the same products mentioned over.
Sure.
So I don't mind that sort of criticism whatsoever. I totally get it. But at the same time, I'm not gonna like Tom and I. Neither of us is gonna like recommend things just for the sake of difference. Like
Right.
if something is what we think is the best product at the price point that will fit person's needs, that's what we're going to recommend. And,
Right.
it changes over time, right? I mean, right now it happens to be like this Denon X4000, these SVS subwoofers. Right now they happen to be really good values and they fit a lot of people's needs at a good price point, but that's going to change. Next year it
Sure.
could be different brands, it could be different models. So
You're not doing
don't
anything
worry.
different than the computer magazine that I like to read.
Right.
They have recommendations of systems in the back, and they just occasionally cycle through different motherboards and
Hmm.
cases and such. So, same thing, just a current recommendation.
Exactly. So, Lee, I know you mentioned you have a couple of things you wouldn't mind to discuss. However, I'm going to
Yes,
put you on pause
that's
until the
okay.
end of the podcast to get to those because we have a lot of questions and feedback from our listeners that we'd
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
try and put a dent into. So, folks,
So let's hit it. Let's do it.
listen through to the end of the podcast because if you want to know what's going on in Lee's life, in Lee's theater, you're going to have to wait. Is that not like
Maybe
the best
even in
tease of
my
all time?
car and my office.
So that's our teaser. That's what we're hooking people with to stay to the end
Right.
of the podcast. But we do have a lot of questions. We do have a lot of feedback, and folks get in touch with us in a number of ways. The easiest way is email. You can email tom@avrant.com. You can email me. That is rob@avrant.com. That will definitely reach us. You can come to avrant.com, our website, and leave a comment there. We also have a Facebook page. That is facebook.com/avrantpodcast. That's all one word together. And we're on Twitter. Tom is at avrant_Tom. Apparently, Mindy Kaling is going to kill him because she said anyone with an underscore in your Twitter name is going to be killed by her. So
I
that
kind
will
of
be the
agree
end of
with her. I
Tom,
don't know.
unfortunately.
Underscore,
That's
seriously.
that's the real secret of where Tom is tonight. Mindy Kaling has sought him
Has
out.
destroyed him for that underscore.
That's the end.
For the record, I'm at Lee Overtweet.
Lee over tweet. Yes,
See,
it
because
is a
I'm so
pun. It
clever.
is a pun. Very good. And I am at First Reflect. And you know what? Folks are actually viewing this live broadcast. See, tonight, since Tom is not here and his internet is destroyed, so there was no way for us to like log into Tom's account because I don't have his login information, and there's no way for him to get it to me when he
Right.
is not on the internet. So I am streaming this on my own sort of it's not even really my account. It was like a thing to figure out how to log back in because the link to my current Google Plus page is just a string of random letters and numbers because my name is just Rob H on Google Plus, and
Uh-huh.
so that doesn't equate to like a fancy name. But I set up like years ago under the First Reflect handle that I also use on Twitter and Xbox Live for that matter, and PlayStation and everything like that. I use the First Reflect handle, so I use that
But
here as well.
everything, by the way, is working beautifully, and so I
It
think we've
seems to be
figured out that
working.
Tom is the weakest link internet-wise. I don't something in Florida. I don't know what. If I'm in Alabama, I'm in like West
Uh,
Central Alabama. If I can get good smooth internet with you, and you're in Canada,
mm-hmm.
wow. So it's Florida.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Maybe the destruction of Tom's infrastructure will actually lead to improvement when he comes back.
You
It's
know
like,
what? You think you're kidding, but a lot of times the worst thing about an internet connection is actually the physical coax cable
mm-hmm,
coming from the telephone pole to your house.
that could be it.
I swapped that out when we
Yep.
moved into this house, and everything got better.
Things must be torn down before they can be repaired. So that is what we're
Yes.
dealing with tonight. And we have lots of questions, so we're going to get right to it. We're actually answering 3 questions that were here last week that we didn't get around to answering in our epic length, like 2 hour and 40-minute podcast, which was
That was
ridiculous.
great. I got so many chores done.
I'm sure people who you normally commute, it's like if it meant that much to you, they were like circling the block 40 times before they actually pulled into their driveway.
Right. I have to not listen to you guys while I'm jogging because I'll forget and just kill myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'll run
That's
till I
it.
die.
That's how it goes. Got to put it on double speed. But from last week, Dan B got in touch with us. Now, Dan's a recent listener of the podcast, and he says we've already influenced him big time by convincing him that he did not need a completely separate two-channel system in addition
Yay!
to his surround sound system, that things actually could sound just fine. He's using some NHT speakers and an Outlaw audio subwoofer. Interesting point is actually their very brand new Ultra X12 is the model name. It's their
Hmm.
brand new subwoofer. And with his question coming up, it's almost a darn good thing that that happens to be the subwoofer he purchased because it will make answering his question a lot easier. He
It's
lucked
a
out.
beautiful subwoofer, by the way.
It's very nice looking, and I'm assuming by most things that might have still been designed by HSU. However, the amplifier being used there, it's not a Bash brand amplifier. I don't have the picture in front of me. It's some other different amplifier that they're using.
Audira, 350 watt Audira amplifier.
Yeah, which honestly I've never heard of before, but
Don't
it's
know.
going to come in handy. So getting on to Dan's question, he still would like to be able to use, he has a Cambridge 840A integrated stereo amp. He's been using that for his two-channel system, and the basic thing is he'd liked, when he's listening to some two-channel content, to not have to power up his entire surround sound system. He'd like to be able to just power on this integrated stereo amp and only power the speakers that he's going to power.
Hmm.
You don't really have to worry about that from a power perspective as an aside, because amplifier power is drawn into the speakers. It isn't like pushed, so it's not as though you're
Right.
wasting amps or something like that. But
Yeah, if
that
this
is
is
not a
an
question we asked
environmental
then.
concern, that doesn't.
Yeah. That's right. That's not Dan, though. He didn't put it that way, but just in case anyone was wondering.
Right.
But he was saying his Cambridge 840A has a home theater bypass input, so that would allow him to take the pre-outs from his Onkyo TXNR809 AV receiver, the front, left, and right pre-outs, send them into the Cambridge in its home theater bypass, and therefore the Cambridge is essentially just acting as an amplifier at that point. So when he turns on his Onkyo, it's just sending out the signal from the pre-outs, and the Cambridge is acting as the amplifier. It's not changing anything to the signal using that
So
home theater bypass input.
he's talking about having both things on at once, but simply listening to two-channel stuff through the Cambridge,
That's right. So his,
passing it through essentially the Onkyo.
yeah. Well, it would be like his two-channel only sources. So say if he has a dedicated CD player or a, dedicated record phono player, those will only be plugged into the Cambridge. So at that point, he'd just turn on that particular source and his Cambridge, and it will just power his front, left, and right speakers and use its own inputs to switch.
Does that mean his front, left, and right speakers are always going to be powered by the Cambridge? Is that what we're saying?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
The Cambridge will
always
be
hooked to the Cambridge.
supplying the power. Yeah. But it brings up an interesting thing, because he's heard us talking about there's no reason to not use your subwoofers when you're using two-channel only. See,
Right, of course.
His Cambridge does not supply any sort of high-pass filter to his speakers. His front, left, and right speakers, when the Cambridge is handling everything, his Onkyo isn't turned on at all, they will always be sending a full range signal to his front, left, and right speakers.
Okay.
That's what's going on there. But it does have a subwoofer output. So the subwoofer can still be used if it's connected to the Cambridge.
Ah, so he'd have to connect the subwoofer to the Cambridge if he want. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But of course, that brings up an interesting question, because what does he do here when he wants to use the Onkyo for surround sound?
Right.
Does he just send a full range signal out of the Onkyo's pre-outs to the Cambridge and tell the Onkyo that he does not have a subwoofer, and therefore the low frequency effects channel, that 0.1 channel, will get mixed into the front, left, and rights, and then the Cambridge will play the full range signal out of his front, left, and rights, and it will also activate the subwoofer, because
Theoretically, that would work. Hey, before we get any farther into this answer, can I ask why he wants to do this?
Well, that's a good question, because it's sort of
because I can't help but address that elephant in the room. It's like,
Yes.
I know you might like that Cambridge, but dude, why? If your concern is that it's going to be better sounding than that Onkyo, I'm not convinced. I just don't see.
Nor am I, to be honest. I mean, he started out by saying we convinced him he doesn't need a completely separate two-channel setup,
But he still wants to cling to something.
holding on to it. Yes, he's holding on to it. So that is one thing. I mean, the thing is this. If he were to just eliminate that Cambridge integrated stereo amp out of his system, he just plugs all of his two-channel sources directly into his Onkyo, and he just switches the Onkyo into stereo listening mode.
It's going to sound great.
Any of those, it will sound great. However, there is a very, very possible scenario where it does not sound the same as his
Well,
Cambridge.
yeah, sure. There could be some subtle difference, yeah.
There could be differences, especially because that Onkyo 809 does have Odyssey Mult EQ XT room correction. The Cambridge does not. Right. So if he is turning on Odyssey room correction, there could be a difference in sound quality there. So perhaps the reason he wants to hold on to the Cambridge is because he simply tuned that particular setup when listening to those particular two-channel only sources exactly to his liking, and he doesn't want to futz with it. Now, I don't have a problem if that's the scenario.
No, see, like I know what it's like to like a setup, and then something comes along and it's time to change. You want to upgrade. You have some needs. I kind of did that, and I remember talking to Tom about it on a previous podcast where I had a Yamaha receiver that had no room correction, anything. It was from the year 2000, and I loved it. And honestly, the only reason I ever pulled it out of the main living room there where my system is I really just needed HDMI switching. I wanted to use a
Right.
Chromecast. And I'm
Yep.
like, okay, this thing's 15 years old.
Hmm.
Let's get a new one. And I did. And there are other issues there that we won't go into, but I'd love to talk about it sometime again. Uh, but in this case, I don't know. I understand liking something, but man, I tell you what, if both receivers are working correctly and
Hmm.
you don't have any processing going on, you turn off room correction, they
Hmm.
ought to sound exactly the same.
Yeah. Or extremely similar, if not exactly the
Extremely
same.
similar.
So.
My recommendation, because I kind of got over my problem, I
Hmm.
just mentally dealt with it because I had to finally admit, you know what, I'm probably hearing more accurate stuff now, and because not every single show is rumbling my tummy. And as much as I liked that deep, rich, chocolatey bass, I had
Mm.
to admit that maybe it's only supposed to happen when things explode and
Yep.
that sort of thing, right?
Yep.
So I just don't see how this is useful, man. Just you got to give it up and just use the one unit. It'll be so much more convenient. And also, if you do have a turntable, I totally respect that too.
Hmm.
Just get
Phono
what do
preamp.
a photo preamp, yeah, a
Well,
phono.
I mean the 809, if I recall correctly, does have a phono input. However, it can depend on the exact
Oh,
phono player
okay,
that you're using, because
right.
most of those phono inputs are only there for moving magnet type of output units, and there are, of course, phono players that are moving cartridge instead, so they would need their own separate preamp. So, there's
Okay,
considerations there, but it is certainly possible. I agree with you that there isn't
yeah.
really any need to keep the Cambridge, but
There's not
to
an
answer,
audio need,
yeah, yeah.
I don't think.
But to answer Dan's question of if he's just set on that, he's going to keep it, and he
Yeah,
just wants to make sure his subwoofer is working correctly. So we mentioned the one way, which is you could set the Onkyo, your front, left, and rights as full range, your
right,
subwoofer as I don't have one,
right.
and that will send the signal, and the Cambridge will play stuff out of the subwoofer. But that's not the optimal way to set things up, because you don't have a crossover. I mean, we're always recommending set your front, left, and right speakers to small, not full range. You don't have a
Which I
separate
don't do.
subwoofer. I know,
It drives Tom insane.
but you don't have a separate subwoofer to control independently.
That's right.
You won't be able to use the separate part of the Odyssey auto setup that is only applying to the zero point 0.1 LFE channel, because that doesn't exist so much anymore as its own separate output. So there are a number of things that are suboptimal about setting things up that way. So here's another way that he can do things. So first of all, let's separate the Cambridge. His two channel sources are plugging directly into that. They're going to be the way they are. Boom, that's done. We're only
Okay.
worrying about surround sound sources that are being plugged into the Onkyo. Now, on the Onkyo, you could still go ahead and set the front, left, and right speakers as small, and that's the signal that's going to get sent out to the Cambridge. You can also set your subwoofer to on, and you can use the subwoofer pre-out from the Onkyo plugging into the bypass input on this Outlaw subwoofer. Now, this is where this particular Outlaw subwoofer, the Ultra X12, comes in really handy, because on its back panel, it actually has 4 inputs.
Oh.
It does. It's very special. So it has 2 inputs labeled as left and right that have an internal crossover knob. Now, what you could do is take the output from the Cambridge and plug it into one of those, one of the ones that is marked as either left or right with the internal crossover knob that is right next to them. Because I'm sure you'll need to do some adjustments, even though the Cambridge is low pass filtering the subwoofer output, in order to get it to integrate just right with the full range left and right speakers being powered by that Cambridge. You're probably going to need to adjust the internal crossover of the Outlaw sub. So you
Okay.
can go ahead and do that. That's going to be one of your inputs. But there's no reason why you can't connect a second input, and this Outlaw has 2 other ones that bypass the internal crossover of the subwoofer.
Hmm.
So
So
here's the
you're saying
scenario.
connect the subwoofer to both?
I am. In this
Ooh.
instance, I
Huh.
am. Because this subwoofer is kind of special. Now, here's what's going to happen. When you're playing a surround sound program out of the Onkyo, it's sending a high pass filtered signal for the front, left, and right speakers. You've set
Yeah.
them to small. So once that signal arrives at the Cambridge, I suppose there might be like 10 hertz or something like that that is above the crossover point that's set inside the Cambridge that you can't adjust at all. So it might be sending a little bit of a signal to the subwoofer, out of the Cambridge's output, there might be a little bit of sound coming out of there,
All
but
right.
not a whole lot because most of the bass has already been filtered out of the signal being sent from the Onkyo to the Cambridge for the front, left, and right speakers.
So when you set speakers to small, that
Hmm.
doesn't just affect the speaker output, the speaker level outputs from a receiver. That affects the pre-outs as well.
It does affect the pre-outs as well. That's
Oh,
right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the pre-outs on the receiver are sending the signal as you have adjusted the settings.
All
So I
right.
mean, otherwise there would be no way to ever use a separate amplifier
Yeah, okay,
and
good
have
point.
it
Yeah.
be anything other than full
All right.
range.
All right.
So this you might be getting a tiny bit of superfluous bass output from the Cambridge's subwoofer output. I have to admit that there might be some of that there, but
Hmm.
honestly, it isn't going to be a heck of a lot. And then
Right.
you have the dedicated LFE signal coming out of the Onkyo, as well as all the bass management that happened inside the Onkyo. That's all getting set to that other input on the back of the Outlaw that bypasses the Outlaw's internal crossover. That's the one you would use anyway to connect to the Onkyo.
Does the sub pick one or the other input based on input
It
level?
does
It
not.
mixes it.
Yep, it mixes them all together.
Okay, so you're getting
Yep.
your tiny little bit that you think might exist
Tiny
from
little
one
bit coming from
source,
the
and
Cambridge.
then the conditioned good
Yep,
stuff from the other.
that's right. And I
All
really,
right.
I think that'll work. Although I have to say, I like Lee's suggestion better, which is just ditch the Cambridge.
Yeah,
So,
man. I'm telling you what. You know what I think it is, and again, I respect this too. I think that there's this. So we'll call it the culture of two-channel purity,
mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
that if I'm playing something two-channel, the whole thing needs to come from a two-channel world.
Yep.
And I think that it comes from a long time ago when surround sound seemed like a strange and silly thing to worry about.
I honestly think a lot of it came from some of the original surround sound processors, which were had nothing other than Dolby Pro logic. Like that
Yeah,
was the
yeah, yeah.
only surround they
Where you had
had.
like that one rear channel that was
Mm-hmm,
frequency limited. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I remember those days. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't blame anyone who heard those and said, my stereo integrated amp sounds better on two-channel sources than this surround sound processor, right?
Right. There's
So,
also a certain sort of respect of elders effect going on here. The folks that were doing it before you were all doing it two channel, and they worked really hard throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s to get those two channels to sound right. And they did.
exactly.
And they sounded great. But it doesn't mean that a modern Onkyo or a Denon or a Yamaha doesn't have good, clean amps that make sound really
Yep.
well.
And
And man,
good DACs that can handle all the digital sources and turn them into analog just fine.
that's right. Just simplify your life, Dan.
Hmm.
Just enjoy it. Try it. Just try just the Onkyo and see if you're pleased. You don't have to
Hmm.
tell the two-channel people. Tell them
So
you still have the Cambridge. Hook it up in another room with it. It's okay.
there you go.
Guys, I love older stuff too. I really do. There we're lacking a certain design element nowadays
Right.
that I'd like to see somebody pull back some retro styling but I don't know what it's going to take
That's
to convince the two-channel purity folks that amps work in
I
multi-channel receivers.
it would take some blind listening tests where there will be no way that they can refute it because as long as it is a cited test where they know which is which,
I don't know, man. It's kind of like
psychology will take
politics.
over.
The harder you present facts to some people, the harder they dig in and deny
There
what
is
you
that.
just said.
There
It
is
doesn't know what you just showed them in their face that they can't detect a difference. For instance, between the high bandwidth, high bit rate files
Mhm.
that you guys have talked about recently and
Mhm.
CD quality audio. It doesn't matter. All you'll do is make them mad, and they'll dig in harder. But it doesn't sound
There's
like Dan is one of those.
that
It sounds
possibility.
like Dan realizes something because
Yep.
he's open to mixing these worlds. I say
Yep.
go ahead and try just the Onkyo give it a few weeks
Yep.
and see how it feels.
I concur. So moving along to Kevin M, he already owns an SVS 2039 PCI. That was a cylinder subwoofer, and that was from many years ago. So he was wondering if he's going to add a second subwoofer now, as we often recommend,
Oh yeah.
whether going for the current PB2000 or PC2000 would work well in conjunction with the 2039 PCI that he already has, or should he sell his 2030 PCI and just get two, say, PB1000s? Because the thing is, he has about $800 total to spend.
Mm-hmm.
So even if he sells the 2030 PCI, he probably can't afford to get two, say, PB2000s or PC2000s. That would probably still be over his budget.
There
So
are
he's
questions I have, though, then,
yeah.
because I have to start asking how much can you get for that 20-39 PCI,
Hmm.
and then I
Hmm.
have to ask how big is your room,
There's
and
that.
things like that to really answer that question. My first instinct, and this has to be true for most everyone listening, is I'd kind of like if I have two subwoofers for them to match. For
Well,
aesthetic reasons, and because I
hmm,
would just worry that I want them both to be capable of the same thing and
yeah.
not in some way poorly complementing each other. Like I don't know what would go wrong. I don't know if anything could go wrong scientifically. You can tell me this, but my instinct is I want those two to match.
Well, that's exactly his concern, right? He's wondering, does this older 2039 PCI match the current lineup? And so here's the thing. The PCI series was replaced by the NSD series. And then the NSD series was replaced by the 2000 series. So
Oh,
in a way, there's a lineage here where the 2000 series is sort of connected, at least in terms of like price point within the SVS lineup to that PCI series. Performance-wise, SVS themselves have said that older PCI series, that the 1000 series, performance-wise, is probably actually kind of closer to them at this point.
oh, okay.
Because there have been improvements made in terms of extension
Well,
and
one would
output
hope that over
capability and
time they're getting,
distortion.
yeah.
Yeah, lower distortion. So, but the thing is, that 2039 PCI, that was no slouch. That was one of the subwoofers that brought SVS into the public consciousness, and one of the ones that people are still extremely pleased with and performs extremely well. So, like Lee was saying, we probably would need to know a little bit more about your room, because if you're at the right at the edge of what that 2039 PCI could do, then perhaps it will be have a tiny bit more distortion than the PB2000, which might be, well within its available headroom. But chances are you're not pushing that 2039 PCI right up to the edge of what it can do. That's kind of an unlikely scenario, to
Right,
be
right,
honest.
right.
In which case, if you were to add a PB2000 or a PC2000, I mean, they will work very well together. We're not talking, some $100 or like home theater in a box subwoofer and then trying to get that to be your second subwoofer along with a PB2000. Like that, there's not that kind of disparity here,
But it does bring up the question, if you have two different subs, in
Mm-hmm.
what ways can they, I don't know, mess each other up? In
I
what
mean,
ways can
really,
they
it's
not work together well? What's the worst that could happen if you have two at least good
yeah,
subwoofers?
it's mostly when one is being pushed right up to or slightly beyond its capabilities, and therefore it's producing a much more distortion
Hmm.
because the two of them are trying to act as equals and one of them just can't keep up. That's where you sometimes have a problem. The other scenario is when you sometimes have a subwoofer that, say, it only plays down to about 40 hertz and then it rolls off really steeply. And then you get a second subwoofer that can play all the way linearly down to 20 hertz. Well, now you have a scenario where essentially from 40 hertz to 20 hertz, you're back to only having one subwoofer, in
Okay. Yeah.
effect. So then all of the stuff we talk about positioning two subwoofers within the room across from one another, that kind of goes out the window for all the frequencies below, whatever the
Mhm.
lowest point is of the lesser subwoofer, right?
So yeah,
So
how old is that 39 PCI
I think
and
it's about 10 years at this
10
point. I
years?
think we're
And how
going back
much
about
can you
10
get
years.
for it? How much can you
Yeah.
get for it? That's honestly, I mean, that's like one of the first things I want to know. Can you get enough for it to get the two you want?
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is I wouldn't even really worry about it. I mean, first of all, you can
Okay.
call SVS and ask them directly because
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
talk to you on the phone. They give great advice and they will tell you whether in your room, in your setup, that 2039 PCI is going to have any difficulty keeping up with a new PB or PC 2000, which my strong suspicion is that it won't and that you will be
Right.
perfectly fine going with.
And didn't you guys mention talking to them in the last show? I seem to
Mm-hmm.
recall something about how they were recommending something smaller than what
Yep,
somebody really wanted.
that's right. Yeah.
Tell
I
me
mean,
to buy the biggest thing you have.
exactly. They are very helpful and very honest over there. So yeah, I would say get in touch with them. They will calm you down and they will let you know what you need, but ultimately that 2039 PCI is a great subwoofer already. So this isn't a case where I would say you must sell it and replace it with two new ones. I really think it can keep up with the current lineup. So I think you're
Right
doing
on.
just fine there, Kevin. So now Joe H. Joe has been using some RCA right angle adapters. So this is like when you have a crunch for space behind a
Yes.
component, and it would help if your RCA adapters went down or up instead of straight out
Or
from the
if you don't
back of
want
the
to put a
plug.
lot of torque on one and
Mm-hmm.
bend, yeah,
Yep.
I've used them on many occasions.
Exactly. So he's connected that to his subwoofer cable, which is a 20-foot run of Blue Jeans cable,
Okay.
and he saw a review on Amazon claiming that this particular right angle adapter degraded the signal quality. This was connected to a subwoofer, and he was wondering if there was any merit whatsoever to that review.
Can I answer this one? Can I
Yes,
answer
you
this one?
may. Yes, you may.
No.
No, no,
There's
no,
not. No,
no.
there's no chance that you're going to bend any of the electrons into little L-shaped electrons as they come out of there. It's okay. You're going to be fine. I mean, you would maybe if the copper wire in that right angle adapter is the width of a human hair,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there'd be something to that. But otherwise, I think you're fine.
I'm more inclined to listen to the 35-star reviews versus the one
Yeah.
star review over at Amazon. Like,
Yes.
I,
Well,
to be honest, I didn't read all of the reviews, so I'm not sure if Joe was actually referring to the one-star review that was talking about it degrading the quality on his subwoofer. But if that was the one to which Joe was referring, that person was talking about it creating like a quite a loud hum. To which I say,
it's broken if it does that.
or push it all the way in.
Yeah,
Like,
there's that too.
have you ever plugged in an RCA cable when the device is already on and you got that horrible hum as it was going
Yes, of
in?
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So maybe that was his problem. Maybe he just didn't push it all the way in.
yeah,
You
yeah. Yeah, because something is dreadfully wrong if a right angle adapter changes the audio at
Yes.
all. I mean, that's it. Copper carries electrons no matter its shape.
Yeah,
And,
over at Blue Jeans Cable, they have a really great series of articles about cables, and they talk specifically about that RCA plug because it was meant for audio, and yet we use it for video in the form of like component video or
mm-hmm.
composite video. They also use the RCA plug, and in those instances, the RCA plug it's actually it creates the wrong impedance. Like there's no way to get a true 75 ohm signal through an RCA plug, which
Huh.
is what that video is expecting. Like the
Yeah,
literally the dimensions of the plug do not allow for that. It was
really.
like it was a really bad choice that was made back in the days of VCRs where they're just like, well, we need to get video out of this some way, and we have all these extra RCA plugs lying around, so we'll just
Right.
use that instead of developing a new video connection like they should have. Um,
Well, they finally came up with S video. Remember
yes,
S
exactly.
video? And it was better. It was visibly better.
So in that instance, perhaps a right angle adapter, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about audio. It's fine. There's no merit to that review.
Right.
So
In my experience, those kind of cables are really tolerant of most signals. I remember making some long RCA cables in an apartment many years ago to run a video signal from downstairs to upstairs, and I made those cables with little connectors from Radio Shack, and it worked fine.
yup. Yes,
As good as low def was going to work anyway.
the frequencies in an audio signal are very, very low as far as like the
Yeah.
sort of frequencies we're dealing with. We're not dealing with megahertz. We're
No.
dealing with kilohertz
You're
at the
not going to
highest.
melt it. It's not that powerful.
Yeah.
It's
It
fine.
works. No worries. So that was all the questions that we didn't get to last week. We're moving on to this week. Once again, I'll just mention you can get in touch with us via email, rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com. Leave a comment at avrant.com, our website, or join us on Facebook, facebook.com/avrant podcast, or tweet us at First Reflect is mine, or at avrant_Tom is for Tom and Lee. People can reach you.
I am at Lee over tweet.
There we go. That's how you get in touch with us. I'm trying to pepper that in a little bit more than Tom does.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe we'll increase our questions to the levels that we can't answer them all, kind of like now.
Where you just have to sit in front of your computer and answer questions 24/7.
Maybe that's the way
That's
it's
the
going to
goal.
go.
Let's turn this into a 24/7 answering marathon.
So, getting on to this week, first we have some quick updates. These are coming in from Infinite Gary, Byron S, Joe S, and Stephen M. I lumped them all together because these are
Okay.
updates. Gary, last week he sent us some photos of this really strange error that his Runco projector was producing. There were red and green traces showing up around the outlines of objects on his screen. It was a very odd video error that I
Hmm.
honestly haven't seen before. So he went ahead, he sent those photos to Runco, and their engineering department, they responded and they said it's likely either this thing called the LVDS, the low voltage differential signal connector,
Of
that
course.
that passes the signal as it comes in into the video processing section, or one of the formatter boards actually within the video processing of the
Wow.
Runco itself. So that was my, I mean, not that specific, but my suspicion last week was that it was something to do with the video processing inside the Runco, and that seems to be not confirmed, but it's their suspicion too, basically, with a little bit more detail of exactly what it might be.
Yeah, it didn't
Um,
sound like something that could be the actual element,
that's right.
the LCD or the whatever this is.
It's a
What is this?
DLP chip. Yeah.
DLP. Yes, that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it was weird because I mean the images were there, but it was just like where there should be a black outline around somebody, it was red or green instead.
Wow.
Very strange. So anyway, Gary's been watching it, and apparently it hasn't shown up again. It hasn't happened again.
Ah, of course.
At least he knows if it something goes wrong, Runco is aware of it and might have
But
an
hey,
idea of how to fix it.
kudos to Runco, man. That's
Mhm.
nice when you can get that kind of response.
Exactly.
It's great when a company will talk to you directly like that, because so
Yep.
many of the bigger name consumer electronics companies, you feel like you're calling the Borg.
Yeah. Or you just, you get a very unhelpful customer service response,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. I've gotten
Doesn't
that
help you
from the
much at
computer
all.
world. I've had a motherboard
Hmm.
company give me literally the wrong answer.
Yep.
Like I proved them wrong after they answered my question. So hooray for Runco.
So, also on the repair side of things, Byron, he was in touch with a repair technician for his 70-inch Sharp LCD. So this was not Sharp directly in his case, but one of their repair techs. So they suspected a failed video processor in his Sharp TV as well. It was a very interesting error he had. Byron actually showed us in one of our Google Hangouts. Now, normally after the show, we record these shows on Tuesday evenings, normally starting around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We started a little later today, and Tom isn't here, so things are very weird, and we're probably
Yeah.
not going to do a Google Hangout after anyway.
Sorry, I had to cook dinner and eat it.
Yup. And I
I
have to get
didn't
up.
know it was going to happen.
I have to get up at like 4 a.m. tomorrow, so I'm not going to be staying up terribly late. But
Ooh,
normally we do have a hangout party after the show. So, if you have questions you want to get answered right away, or you just want to come hang out and chat with other AV Rant listeners and chat casually with Tom and myself and, Lee if he's around.
yeah,
You
maybe
don't, you
might
don't
be
really
here.
show up to these hangouts much, Lee. That's we
No,
gotta get you on
well,
those.
I'm notoriously lazy, and if I'm comfy on the couch with the wife and the dog, I see the little notification come in on my phone. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I'm sorry. I'll get on it a little more often, maybe.
No worries. But we do have a good time at those hangouts. So Byron was one of the folks he's dropped by. He showed us, he turned the camera around and showed us his TV, which is like, he turned it on, it was like this big yellow splotch, and that was about it.
Well, isn't that Sharp's thing? They have that yellow,
Right, yeah, the extra yellow.
that extra
splotch on.
yellow.
It's the only thing that was left working. The red, green, and blue they futzed out. No, it wasn't even that. It was just like a splotch. So
Right, right.
anyway, they were saying it's probably a failed video processor in there as well. Now the thing was, the tech was saying very hopefully Sharp will cover that repair under warranty because he was literally 2 weeks past the
Oh.
1 year manufacturer's
Ah,
warranty. 2 weeks. Now that would be really. I mean, all the people always have that like superstition that the warranty was designed so that if it fails, it will fail exactly as the warranty is finished.
yeah, like there's a timer in there. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I've felt that before.
Like the milk, right? The cows lean over and tell you when it's going to go bad. So
Didn't know where you were going with that.
but I don't think that was the case. So hopefully they will cover that. So Byron will keep us updated there. So over in happier news, Joe S. He's the fellow who Tom actually went and visited in person to
Yes.
help sort of sort out his theater plans. He ordered his SVS PB12 Plus subwoofers. They arrived. He said it's like Christmas in February.
Oh,
Not that much removed. So he's hoping that Tom will be able to go visit him in person again and help set them up. He's got his AVR X4000. He's got his SVS subwoofers. He's got his KEF speakers. I mean, it's like an
I feel good hearing about it. I gotta be honest. It's still, oh man, that feels good. You know what I like the most, and I think Tom laughed about a picture of me on Facebook about. I like sniffing those electronics when they come
Yep,
in.
that's right.
Oh, you open that box and
That new subwoofer smell. I'm sure he's enjoying it right now.
those volatile chemicals they use, just it's
I
so
have
good.
to say, one of the really nice things. I mean, I have to look up that fellow's name who was like, not happy that we kept mentioning SVS. But one of the things I love about the SVS subs is you plug them in and you don't even know if they're on. Like if they didn't have that little blue LED, you couldn't even
Oh,
tell because they are just they're
nice.
dead. They're dead silent. You can put your ear right up against the amplifier. Like even with my HSU sub with its bash amplifier, it sounds dead silent. But if I like physically press my ear against the amplifier, the back of the
Yeah.
amplifier, physically press it against the cabinet, I can hear that. You have that normal little bit of hum that comes from almost every electronic device. If you get close enough, you can hear a little bit of hum
So
from
did
the
you
power
actually
supply.
put your face right next to the sub? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I know you did. And did you simultaneously kind of stroke it on the side of the sub and hug
Well,
it? And
well, mine, I gave it a little pat because it doesn't. Mine do have that nice velour covering on
there
the
you go.
outside. So
Yeah.
I'm telling you, right, it's so nice. It's sitting there, you don't even know it's on, and then something hits in that LFE channel, and then you know it's on.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So finally, a mix of happy and sad news. Stephen M. He had. This is according to SVS's distributor in Australia, the first ever SB2000 amplifier failure in Australia.
Wow.
In Australia, I'm sure others have failed somewhere else in the world, but
Wow. That's like
yeah,
Qantas has never had an accident, isn't
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
it?
He's like, I guess I was just the really unlucky one. But it has a happy ending to the story because Steven, he actually wanted to end up praising the service of SVS and this particular distributor in Australia because all he did, he called the distributor, he described his issue. That day, they sent out a replacement amplifier. It arrived 2 days later
Oh.
at his door. It came with the instructions. It was like there's 12 screws holding it in there, so I guess that's a little bit of work to undo all of those. But removed it, swapped in the new one, followed the instructions. He's like, it was easy. When he pulled out the old amplifier, he was like, oh yeah, there's a blown component with like a telltale black
Like a
like
burn mark
explosion
around it.
around
Yeah.
it.
That's
So
good stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like any mystery what happened there. It's like, oh yes, that has exploded. And
Literally the smoking gun. Just
that's right. But it all turned out well. So he wanted to say it's really nice when the service also matches the component. That you're getting a
yeah.
quality component, but you're getting the service to back it up too. So that's a happy ending to that story. So we're gonna stay in Australia for now. This is Gary. This is not Infinite Gary. This is Gary from Australia. He
I
actually
should
left a
flip the
comment.
picture on my webcam upside down for this.
There you go. Yep. Things got to
Okay,
spin the other way.
here we
So
go.
he actually left a comment on YouTube. I said last week I would go back through our YouTube videos and see if anyone's left comments there, and a couple people had. So
Like,
I found
oops,
Gary's.
we should check that.
That's right. He wanted to know our feelings about vintage electronics, if our feelings about vintage electronics extended to vintage speakers as well, because this
Yeah.
was either last week or a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about vintage gear and saying like, sometimes there are products that have a distinctive sound to them. We're not really like for or against, but that just like because something's vintage, it doesn't necessarily better.
Right, that's my only thing. If you love something, I mean, I tell you what, there's like we said it before a little while ago. Some stuff is just beautiful,
Exactly.
and that's legit.
Aesthetically. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you just love it. And some stuff sounds the way you want it to sound, how you
Mhm.
want it to sound. That's legit too. As long
Yeah.
as you don't think it's better because it's vintage. That's all that
Nothing
matters.
new can be good, yeah. So, he was wondering if we felt the same way about vintage speakers. He's enjoyed listening to some Tannoy speakers, and he suggested to a relative of his who has these huge Pioneer speakers, Pioneer brand speakers from ages ago. He was suggesting, these were really good speakers in their day, so, pay the money, get them reconditioned. This was sort of the advice that he was giving. And so he was wondering if we agree that, getting those classic Pioneer gigantic, like 18-inch woofer built into them type of design, getting them reconditioned, if that's worth it. What's your opinion?
It's not necessarily not worth it. It's not my kind of thing. My budget's too small to go taking that chance. And there are amazing speakers being made today. It just like there's amazing music being made today. It's not like all the good music got made in the 70s.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Or the 80s. Definitely not in the 90s. Well, some. But no, there's nothing wrong with vintage gear, but if you have the money to burn on it and it's important to you, you just love the speakers, have fun. They're not going to sound
Yeah.
terrible probably, but if money's a little tight or what you're really looking for is sound quality and you're not so excited that they're old, then get a new pair of speakers. That's what it boils down to, I think.
I mean, the thing is, I would even say if you were to say stick with Pioneer, because
Yeah,
maybe that's important to them,
sure.
but get the current second generation Andrew Jones speakers. They
Yeah.
are way smaller, way smaller,
It
but
almost have to be.
they're only $130 each, you know. So I mean,
Yeah.
$260 to get a pair. Chances are, I mean, I would strongly doubt he can actually get like original parts for those
Mhm.
Pioneer speakers. I mean, maybe,
No,
but
I think what happens is people find other drivers of the same size and they get a
right, yeah,
similar sound out of the cabinet.
yeah,
I had a friend of mine who showed me his nice, amazing, he couldn't believe what deal he got on them, kind of, maybe they were Advent or something. And I think they were late 70s, early 80s. And, I was like, that's cool. And he played them. I'm like, it sounds nice. I don't know if I'd have gone through that much trouble, but it sounds nice. Okay, cool. Yay.
right.
You're happy. I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know, and we're enjoying listening to this album, and yay. That's
Yeah,
good.
so exactly. So I mean, if the thing is, if the allure of these classic gigantic Pioneer speakers is the way they look, like that's
Yeah.
a huge part of why you want to play them, I mean, by all means, I have zero problem. I mean, the thing is, you could actually replace all the drivers with current up-to-date drivers that just happen to physically fit.
Yeah.
You could go to Parts Express and get designs and use the cabinet, but basically nothing else, and get the drivers in a new crossover and essentially have a brand new speaker that just has the old look and feel of the
Yeah.
original cabinets. So I mean, there are lots of ways to come at this, but I would say if it's going to cost you more than $260,
Yeah.
and what you actually just want is a good pair of accurate, linear, nice sounding speakers for that little money,
Yeah.
then I would say here's the old and here's the new from the same brand, and I think you'll kind of be amazed what you can get for that little money if you give them those
Right,
a try.
because they picked the new modern drivers to match the cabinet and they tuned everything just right and they're fresh and pretty and they got that great smell we talked about. I'd probably want the new ones, but I kind of know where he's coming from. I know we're
Yeah.
going to be talking about somebody in just a second about converting an old piece of vintage gear.
That's
And
right. Yeah, that is James B. He's actually come and started joining our hangouts after the show. So good fellow there. He's a custom installer. He owns his own business where he does custom installations of home theaters, and so he's been having fun chatting with us and actually getting some new ideas. Last week he came in and he was saying he's actually designing speakers himself now, and he was doing these open baffle designs. And I made the comment I was a little bit surprised he wasn't using a digital crossover, and he was like, I never really looked into that. That wasn't the first thing he looked into. So, Ray was there. Ray always drops by our hangouts, and we showed him the mini DSP, and all the things he can do with that. And there's even like a mini DSP that has its own little digital amplifiers built into it, so you can have a separate amplifier for each driver in the speaker
ooh,
for a relatively low amount of money.
yeah.
So
And
it's
can I tell you, I'm so glad James sent the picture of the
mhm.
sort of console stereo that he worked on.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I have, over the past few weeks, I sort of got this idea after going to a thrift store with my wife, and I saw some old tabletop radios from like the 30s and
Hmm.
40s and into the 50s, and I'm like, what'd be really, really fun is to get on Parts Express, order some drivers, pull the guts out of those things, fit some drivers behind there, refinish the thing if I can, just
Hmm.
and turn it into a Bluetooth audio device
All
that someone
right.
could use with their
Yep.
phone. So it looks cool, it looks
Yep.
vintage, or maybe you want to do something artistic and do some
Yep.
crazy colors on it. I would love very much to do that. Maybe I should talk to James and see what his experience has been like, because I'm honestly really interested in doing that. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, what James did, he sent us a picture. He has one of these old record players, vinyl record players, that was like the type that was built into one of those large consoles. You remember there used to
Yeah.
be TVs like that too, right? They
Yeah,
had
yeah.
all this wood trim around them and everything like that. So
Yeah,
that's what this
remember
is
the old
like.
days when a TV broke and you put a smaller TV on top,
There you go. Yeah,
right? You can't do that anymore.
not so much. Not with the flat panels. Doesn't work too
But
well.
this is where that comes from. This is a big, huge, wide, heavy wood cabinet, and it does take me back to childhood. That's
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I don't know if it has the speakers integrated into it. I mean, it has like grill covers on the left and right. I kind of suspect there might actually be speakers built into the thing too,
Yeah, I
because it was
think there are. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it kind of looks like there might be, but I'm not certain on that. But in any case, James was saying it actually still works. Like
Oh,
the photo
nice.
player, it still functions, but he's decided to convert that lovely, classic, retro-looking cabinet into like a little mini bar. And that's what
Well,
he's
that
gonna
tells you all you need to know about the sound quality
That's kind
of
of
the vintage gear.
it's kind of an indication that instead of like refurbishing it or just using it as is because it does still function, it would serve him better as a bar. Just
Okay,
the wooden
yeah. I
cabinet
mean,
of it. So,
I don't blame him on that one. You do whatever you want to with it. It's
but
about having fun, you know. That's why
that
I
is
want
the
to take
cool
these
thing,
old
though.
radios and turn them into wacky looking things with Bluetooth.
That's
That's what
right.
I
You
want
know,
to do.
people might recognize it. They'd be like, "Oh, you have one of those old classic record players." It's like, "Yeah, look at this. It's filled with booze." So,
It's even more awesome. Probably back in the 70s, someone somewhere made a console stereo that you could put booze in.
oh, I'm
There were
sure
a lot
there
of
must
wet
be.
bars put into houses in the 70s, so that had
Maybe we can make a dancing booze speaker instead of a dancing water speaker.
to
We
Ooh.
talked about those a few weeks ago. I'm
Ooh.
not sure how well that would work.
I like how you
There's no
think,
reason. It's
Rob.
a liquid. It should work. So Nick B thanked us for discussing his basement home theater. We've been talking about them for several weeks now, and he
Ah.
has pretty well decided now. This is the fellow who has a very large basement, but part of it is already pre-finished, and he has a large family room section, but it's open to this hallway that goes down to a utility room, and the utility room makes noise. So he's like, I don't really want to use the family room. And he has this bedroom that's above the utility room, and he was thinking maybe
Mm.
knocking out a wall and extending it, and Tom was sort of in favor of that. But he's basically decided now to use the larger family room section and just close off the hallway, install a door to the hallway, so that will block the noise coming from the utility room, and turn that family room more into almost a rectangle. It's still a little bit irregularly shaped, but almost a
So
rectangle.
Rob wins.
Well, okay, sure. I'll claim victory. What can Tom do? He can't defend himself right now.
No, he's in Florida. They don't have internet down there.
Tying himself to a palm tree to not get blown away. That's what
That's
he's doing.
right.
So, because
Caught
of
in
the
a
way
crazy wind vortex with an alligator or something. It's
right,
horrible.
he's just holding on to Ethernet cables. He's like, I must get internet back. That's
Well, that's what he deserves for having warm, comfortable temperatures.
oh yeah, there's that. I'm sure the lizards are flocking into his house as we speak,
That's
trying to
right from the last show.
trying to find a safe haven.
That's what you want when you're caught in a terrible windstorm. You want reptiles all over the place in the air too.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay,
Keep
but
it company.
anyway, this lovely basement room.
Yes. So Nick's room, in his family room, his theater is going to be offset. So it's going to be pushed over towards the left side of the room,
Hmm.
and so he's going to have quite a bit more distance to the right wall. You know, the right wall is quite far away, and then the left wall is, you know, fairly close adjacent
Right,
to his
right.
left side. So we were talking about make sure that he puts a lot of absorption material at the first reflection points of that left wall. You're trying to create an acoustic scenario where the reflections off of that left wall won't be a lot stronger than the reflections that eventually make you back from the right hand side of the room because
Right.
they had to travel a much greater distance. He was wondering if he could actually use front wide speakers. So I've talked about these front wide speakers that go 60 degrees to the left and right of dead center, and that essentially puts them at your first reflection points if you were in a symmetrically laid out room. That's
Hmm.
where they would end up being. And I've talked about how much I like the front wide speakers. I really
Yeah.
quite enjoy the sound that they provide. So he's saying, could he install front wide speakers, use an expansion program like DTS Neo X or Odyssey DSX, and would that then basically create the first reflections in a way that is controlled by the program material itself and his AV receiver? And would that sort of get rid of any issues with the physical first reflections off of that left wall?
It would not eliminate the physical first reflections because they're
Mm.
still there bouncing off the wall. And now you're
Yes, they
adding
are.
extra sounds bouncing off the same wall.
Yep.
So it doesn't fix it. You might really like the wide speakers, but you're going to have to do something to that wall. You know
Yep.
what? I have a wall. It's kind of similar in its placement. I'm looking at the dimensions of his room, and it looks
Hmm.
like he's got probably 8 or 9 feet between his head and the TV screen. What it looks like.
It might be a little bit more because that's a large room. I got to
It
tell
looks
you,
like
the seat you're looking
his
at is like a six-person seat there, so it's It's a larger room than what you might be thinking.
Really? Well, okay, I'm just looking at his scale, and he's got
Hmm.
3, 6. He's got maybe 9 feet between where,
It could be, yeah.
if that scale is correct, because he has the room is about
Right.
18 feet wide, and deep looks like about 12 feet deep. That's actually very similar to my living room.
Well, it's actually not 12 feet deep. The line at the back there is actually the thing overhead distributing the weight of the
Oh,
floor.
okay, so it's really deep.
That
Oh,
room
so
goes
he's
all the
sitting,
way back
so
there.
he's sitting in the middle of the room
Yeah,
depth-wise,
that's right.
but his head is about 9 feet from the TV.
It might be, yeah, it might be 9 or
I
10
see.
feet. That
Okay,
could
but
be,
but
yeah.
the room is a good like 20 feet deep. Okay.
Well, at least I think it's
Oh,
more like 30.
yeah. Well, if his scale is right,
Yep.
it's going to be about 20 feet to what looks like another wall, and then the stairwell goes back a few more feet.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I see. Okay, now the drawing makes sense to me, and I see what the
Okay.
situation is. Yeah. So yeah, you're going to need to treat that back wall because you're going to get these long reverb reflections off the back wall, and you're going to need to treat that left wall especially.
Hmm.
And off to the right, I'd put something over there too. I mean, I just treat the whole thing. Treatments everywhere. You,
Yeah.
you are going to have big echoes. That's a big room. That's a big
Yeah.
room.
You
See,
can
I
you
was
can
fooled
have.
at first by his drawing. His
That's right.
little, what he's setting aside, the part of the room he's setting aside
Hmm.
as his home theater, part of that room is about the size of my living room. It's just that
Right.
I have walls and he doesn't. His
Yes.
room keeps going.
That kind of makes a difference. Yeah. So
Big difference.
on the tip of the front wide speakers, as much as I am a fan of them, it's unfortunately I'm saying a little bit hard to really highly recommend them, only because the only time they're ever going to be used is in one of these expansion programs, or very occasionally in actual Dolby Atmos content, not the Dolby Surround Up Mixer
Hmm.
that comes in a Dolby Atmos capable receiver, because the Dolby Surround Up Mixer does not use front wide speakers. Even if they're physically connected, it just won't use them. So occasionally there might be what they call an audio object that is
Hmm.
located in a place where it could make use of a front wide speaker, but that's not really the same thing. That's not what Odyssey DSX does, where it expands the front soundstage to make use of those front left and right wide speakers, or what
Right.
DTS Neo X does, where it fills in the gap between your front right speaker and your surround right speaker and your front left speaker and surround left speaker. It fills in that extra gap there at that 60 degree mark. So this immersive audio system that we're leading into now, it doesn't really use the front wide speakers in its up mixing. You'd only be using it in the up mixer, and as Lee pointed out, it is not eliminating the physical first reflections of your front
No.
left and right speakers. So I will certainly say, if you just want to take an extra pair of bookshelf speakers or whatever you're using as your surrounds or surround backs or something, and try them out in that position and see if you like the effect. But I would not recommend them as any sort of fix
No.
for the first
And
reflection
I
issue. It's
wouldn't
not that.
start with them. Get
Mm,
5.1 or 2 correct
right?
first.
Yep.
Get that sounding as best you can. Then go grab some extra speakers and see if you
Yep.
like the effect enough to
Yep.
stick them in. Yeah, but get the basics right first. It's going to be an
Yeah.
awesome room though.
Yeah, really,
It's gonna
really,
be.
what I've found with the front wide speakers is that they work best when you do as much as you can to eliminate the physical first reflections of the front left and right speakers. So,
Right.
sort of taking the place of, but they are not a fix for. They're not doing some kind of sort of like sound wave cancellation or something like that.
No, they're not doing magic.
Dirac is talking about, creating algorithms that might allow for that sort of thing, using physical speakers as essentially active bass traps or active sound wave cancellation.
Wow, so it's
So
like sound canceling headphones, but for
yeah,
your room.
for the room. Yeah. But
Wow.
it's not here yet, and that is a heck of a lot of measurement and number crunching. And
Yes.
I don't know how the heck they're ever going to manage that for more than one seat.
Or
But
more than one room.
at the current state of things, it's not happening yet. So
Right. That sounds like you need a team of scientists to come to your house at that point.
yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it would be amazing, but that's not happening soon.
So David K, moving on to our next question, he says he's been following AV Rant's advice and has slowly built his dedicated 12-foot by 13-foot theater in his basement. He's built that over the course of this past year.
Hmm.
And he's painted all the walls a dark brown, not quite black, but a very dark brown. He
Deep,
bought all of
rich, chocolatey brown with
yeah,
that deep, rich, chocolatey base.
it's an espresso, he said. It's
Oh,
a matte espresso.
I like it. Sounds good.
Yep, and he's completely blocked off. He says this is in the basement, so it has one egress window, but he's like basically stuffed it full of like pillows and then covered it over completely, so there is no light getting through that, and his
Okay.
window does not rattle when
There you
his
go.
subwoofer goes off. So he's
Yeah.
taking care of that, and he says basically the reason it took a year is because he waited for sales or clearance items and things like that, and got everything as it was on discount. And he says he and his wife are extremely happy with the results, but he's not quite finished yet. So he's really proud of his gear, and I wanted to mention it because, this is a great example of what sort of prices you can get if you just
Yeah,
keep.
that is some Zen-like patience, man.
I
Kudos to you
know.
for being able to do that and to stay organized the whole time and know what to buy next.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Have it
good.
on a list and keeping an eye out. Yeah, so he got one of the
Yeah.
BenQ W1070 projectors. That's a DLP projector. It's very nice. It normally goes for about $1,000. It was $1,200 retail when it was, first introduced. He got it for $681.
There you go.
He got it refurbished, so basically half price. He got his screen from Visual Apex. He got their Vapex 110 screen. That's a 1.1 gain screen. He got that on a Cyber Monday sale for $333 for a really
Yeah.
nice screen. So there's that. Or I guess it's a 110-inch screen, rather. And then the speakers, there he got the Pioneer Andrew Jones
The
Generation 2.
aforementioned Pioneer Andrew Jones.
That's right. He got the whole 5 speaker set. That's the tower left and right speakers, the center and the bookshelf speakers for surrounds. Got them on sale, all 5 of them for $325.
Come on. Wow.
Like, yeah, I normally say like you can usually get them for $550 for all 5, and I'm like, at that price they're a steal. Come at
Yeah.
$325, but getting them on sale. His subwoofer is an HSU STF2. That's a sub I've recommended many times. He got it for $365. That's all
Yeah.
in. So, saved a little bit of money there on one of HSU sales. And then he's got a PS4. He traded in his old Wii and PS3 so he could get a PS4.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And his preamp and amp, he got the Emotiva UMC 200 and their UPA 700 amplifier. He got those on a Black Friday sale for $799. So,
Wow.
he's got himself separate, so he can swap out that preamp anytime he likes and keep the amplification. Not a bad plan at all. So kudos there. What he did, he actually put all of his gear outside of his theater and then just ran the one long HDMI cable in to his
Wow.
projector. And the speaker wires, of course. So he has all the ancillary gear, wires, cables, wall plates, infrared extenders, stuff like that, so he can control everything. So in total, he spent $3,200 on his theater. Now, that's
Wow.
not chump change, but what he got
No,
for
but what he got,
$3,200,
yeah.
yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, no, the OCD side of me and my tendencies, I'm just loving how he planned that out really well. That's a
Yep.
good job. Way to do it, man.
I spent $3,200 on 2 subwoofers.
There you go. You know what? 10 years ago, we spent more than that on the 50-inch plasma.
Yep.
So,
I will tell you, if I had $3,200, as much as I love my 2 subwoofers, there is zero question that what he has as a theater outperforms just 2 subwoofers all by themselves. Because I can't
yes,
watch an
'cause,
image on those, and
No, you can't.
play frequencies higher than about 200 hertz.
Maybe you could get a good neck massage. leaning against
yeah,
them.
I could lay. They are cylinders. I could lie right down on them.
There you go.
Yeah. So David wins there. So anyway, moving on to the next phase of his theater, he wants to start adding acoustic treatments. He's heard us talking about that, and he'd like to go the do-it-yourself route so he could save as much money as possible.
Of course.
He's heard us talking about GIC Acoustics, and how basically their prices that you're not saving a whole lot of money by building it yourself, but you can save some money. But he wasn't really sure exactly where to start and where to look to get, do-it-yourself materials and do-it-yourself plans, or just wanted our recommendations because he's poked around sort of like on Amazon and that and seen some stuff there, but he wasn't sure if that's the place to go. And so we mentioned his room's 12 by 13. He's got a sectional couch in there. It's 1 foot away from the back wall. He's heard us say, get your seat as far away from the back wall as you can, and that's as much as he could was 1 foot. But
Yeah, that's all I can do too. My head's about a foot from
Yeah.
the back wall, but there's curtains. Yeah.
Yeah. So, he's wondering where to place them, where to start, what ones to start with. So, I've got some links for him. Now, I mean, the first link, I didn't even put it in this rundown because I thought Tom was going to be here, but Tom wrote a couple
Sorry,
of
it's
articles.
me.
That's right. Tom wrote a couple of articles on Audioholics. He called them "Do-It-Yourself Absorbers for the Less Than Handy Man." So if you were to Google that, that would come up. Where I'm also going to have the link posted there at avrant.com. That's where we post all the links for things that we mentioned is avrant.com right now. Look in the show notes there. But there's a few places you can go. So I'll have these links posted. But if people would like to look them up themselves, there is atsacoustics.com. This is a company, actually, I have to thank one of the listeners for even bringing them to my attention because I didn't even know about them. But they
Mm,
are even cheaper than Gik,
wow.
using very similar materials, and they have a nice do-it-yourself section where you can get all the materials by itself. The one thing I'll mention about the ATS frames, because you can buy the frames as a little kit and then just assemble it yourself, they put a back on their frames, like just a flat piece of, uh, either plywood or particle
Right.
board or something like that on the back there. I am not a huge fan of having a solid back on an absorption panel,
Hmm.
because if you do that, then you can't do the thing where you have the panel actually like a couple inches out from the wall. You can't put an air gap behind the absorbing part of it. So if you have a 2-inch thick panel, you really have a 2-inch thick panel. The sound
Yeah.
wave is going to go through that 2 inches and then hit the back of the panel that's physically installed there and then come back out. So you don't
Right.
get the same low frequency absorption as if you had an open back, so that it could go through it, travel a distance, hit the wall, then come back through. So that just, lengthens the, literally the wavelengths that you can affect.
Right. Can I tell you a little DIY history with me? I
Mm-hmm.
used to do radio. I did a radio show for several years, and this was, a zero budget show, right? And so the radio station itself had some sound absorption, and it was just flat panels with what amounted to fiberglass or quilt batting, and then
Mm-hmm.
fabric over it, and then stapled on the back and hung up. And for most of your mid-range to higher frequencies, it did
Sure.
great.
Yep.
And that if what you're trying to do, like in the case of a radio station
Mm-hmm.
or a room where you're recording your voice, you don't want the mid-range and high frequencies bouncing and getting that slap
Right.
echo.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so what I'm and like some of the best sound absorption I ever had was an ugly Walmart comforter that I hung on the wall
Yep.
behind me, man, and it was a little bit curtained, like it
Yep.
was a little bit scrunched up side to
Sure.
side.
Yep.
Dude, that was wonderful. That sounded professional. Looked like hell,
Yes.
but
I,
it
I,
sounded.
I'm pretty sure that he wants things that look a little better than that.
But
So
I say all that to say that it doesn't have to be expensive.
that's right.
It most of the problems that people experience with first reflections and stuff are in the mid-range to high frequency. A simple, relatively flat panel that is only 2 inches and is slap up against the wall is still going to absorb
Yep.
most of the problems.
But in a
But I'd be
small
curious to
room,
know what frequencies of bass are being absorbed or near bass are being absorbed the farther you get out and the deeper that absorption panel gets.
well, it's basically a quarter of whatever wavelength. So if you have a 6-inch thick panel with a 6-inch air gap behind it, then essentially you've got a 12-inch, a 1 foot,
Hmm.
distance that you've got there. So that will be quite effective to frequencies that are as long as about 4 feet long,
And
which is
what
down to
frequency is that? Come on, do the math.
about 250 hertz.
About 250. Okay, all
Yep.
right. All right, I can picture that. A 1 foot gap
Roughly.
plus absorption, 1 foot, 250 hertz. Got it.
Yeah,
Reference point.
you can always remember that 1,000 hertz is pretty close to 1 foot in wavelength,
Ah,
and then every time you have that, so 500 is 1 octave down and twice as long. So 500 hertz is about 2 feet. Well, 2.2 feet is closer, but
hmm.
that's sort of the rough way you can think of it. 1,000 hertz, a foot long, and then it gets twice as long
Right.
for every halving. But in any
Gotcha.
case,
Yeah.
yep. We're actually going to come up with that. That was a question later on. We might get to it, we might not, but I sort of gave it away.
Oh,
But as far as just getting do-it-yourself materials for as cheap as possible, ATS Acoustics, pretty hard to beat, as far as their prices for the raw
oh, these
materials
look
go.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did put the link to Gik Acoustics. They have a do-it-yourself section as well. They pretty much only sell the actual absorbing material and the fabric covering there. They don't sell like kits for the frames. So they're not sort of the best resource for that just yet. They might be adding it in the future. Who knows? They keep updating their lineup quite nicely. Now, one that I really like is Acoustamac. That's MAC at the end, acoustamac.com. They sell full kits. So they give you the frame, the fabric cover, the insulation material, and the hardware to mount it onto your wall. They give you all of that in a kit for basically half the price of the finished panel. So if you just bought the panel from them, it's about half the price to get the kit. That is not the absolute cheapest you could get something, but it sure is convenient. And so if your goal is you save a little money on shipping too, because of course things can be flat packed instead of being, a fully assembled panel. So save a little bit on shipping, and then you save on the labor because you're putting in the labor to assemble it yourself, and you basically get the panels for half price. So that I like. I like that a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I do too. Again, I haven't had a lot of time to look at this, as you know. Tom called me while I was brushing my teeth, so I haven't exactly done my research. Looking at, yeah, that is very nice. Those are reasonable prices. So I'm looking at these prices where, these kits, like here's a 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 inches, which I assume then is absorbing something like a 1200 hertz signal, right? Something like that. $22 for one of those. That's not too bad. And is that like maybe it goes up from there if you pick a fancy fabric? I don't know.
Oh yeah. The more they do have more expensive fabrics, but yeah, it's a good way. Over at Ready Acoustics, they do have, you can get their chameleon frames, and you can get kits there to put together whole panels. They are not cheap. Ready Acoustics is not, cheap.
Oh, but look at those bass traps with those pretty cutout designs on the side of the frame.
Yeah, they are cool. If you like the looks of their frames, it might be worth it. But they do have a cool thing called their Ready Bag, which is basically like they've sort of sewn together the cover on everything but one side, and then you just slip the material into the bag, and then you can actually the bag is like already finished. Doesn't have a frame around it, of course, but you just have to sew up that one side, and then you can just hang that as it is.
So you're basically hanging a pillow.
Basically hanging a pillow. Yeah, you would want to use the rigid fiberglass for that, because it has to have its own structural integrity. But if you really want something simple, like I just need a way to cover up the insulation I was going to put on my walls anyway,
right?
Kind of hard to beat a Ready Bag. And the last one I'll mention is Acoustic Fields. Dennis Foley runs things over there, or I hope that's his name. I think I got that right. I know his last name's Foley. Anyway.
Sorry if your name's not Dennis, Darren.
I know. I'm sorry. Sorry if I screwed that up.
Sorry, Danny.
Over at Acoustic Fields, what he's done is put together like instructional manuals, so you can purchase those to actually make like the same panels that they sell, because their panels are not inexpensive either.
No.
But you can get the plans to put them together yourself if that's what you'd like to do, or they do sell kits as well.
Oh, his diffusers look really cool, like old school studio stuff. Yeah, that looks like Muscle Shoals recording studio about 1975. I like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things is that like diffusers are not something you see a lot of do-it-yourself. You see a lot of do-it-yourself absorbers, but not so much do-it-yourself diffusers. So even just getting the plans, because you do have to assemble a diffuser correctly. You can't just honestly do it willy-nilly. Right. There is a mathematical equation of where those slats should be positioned and how long they should be and relative to one another. So
and we thought we didn't need to pay attention in math in high school.
I know, right?
Somebody's out there using it.
Just paying for the plans might be well worth it, because you can, of course, go and get the material yourself and cut it yourself and put it together and end up with the same panel for a lot less money than buying the finished product.
Yes.
But
plus your choice of material and appearance.
Exactly. So that takes care of those. Lastly, Kevin wanted to know for David. Sorry, got that.
By the way, you're cutting out for me, so I'm just going to let that happen. And
No,
we're good. We're good.
Yep, that's right. That's the internet for you. He's considering like a 4K projector, maybe getting better speakers, maybe getting a second subwoofer, maybe replacing the subwoofer he has and then getting a pair of those, getting a mini DSP, getting a new preamp. All of these things are swinging around his head. What would we suggest as the first thing to do after he's done his acoustic treatments? This is an easy answer, isn't it? I mean, you know Wesley.
It's sub. Second sub.
Second sub, man. Second sub. That's the only.
Second
I
sub.
might do that before the acoustic treatments, to be honest. Second sub.
But I'm gonna tell you what though. Now, if it's me, and again,
Uh,
I come from a world of I ain't got a lot of money. If I'm happy with the way something sounds, you have to ask yourself, what are you least happy with?
right, right.
If your sound is pleasing you and you're showing it off to people and you and everybody else are having a great time and the movies sound good to you, maybe what you want is something else. Maybe you want that 4K projector. I don't know. It depends on what's more important to you.
I was gonna comment on that. I'm like, dude, that 4K projector, that is the last. That is the last one on the list. At least
Yeah,
right now.
let that mature a bit more.
Yeah, don't get a 4K projector right now, man. I mean, there are 4K projectors right now that don't even have HDCP 2.2 because those chips didn't exist.
Right.
So there was nothing they could do about it. So yeah, don't get a 4K projector now. Maybe in a couple of years. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I tell you what, though, I've been tempted on a 4K. There have been stirrings amongst myself and my wife for getting a new television, and
Dude,
those
don't.
4K, not projector, of course, but just television.
I mean,
They are rather pretty.
if
And
you're
I keep
gonna do
thinking,
it,
does anyone here's just a quick question for you. Does anyone sell a little media player that can output 4K? And the reason I ask is because for me, I'm a photographer as well.
hmm
Uh, my photos are well more than 4K.
right, right, right.
And having a slideshow showing
Mm-hmm.
4,096 pixels across or whatever it is
No, it's, yeah,
would just be
3040.
nice. I mean, it really would be
Yeah.
nice.
I'm not sure how many of those 4K TVs that are on the market right now, if you could just put those photos on a USB stick and plug it into the USB port, that might work for something like photos.
Yeah, I want to
Um,
pull it across the network. I don't want to go moving files
yeah,
around to do it.
yeah. Some of the TV, I mean, a lot of them are, quote unquote smart TVs, so they have a DLNA connection that can just
DLNA.
pull it directly across into the
But
TV
if
without any
someone could
external
verify
device.
for me that this 4K
Yeah,
TV will at least show me 4K pictures straight from
right.
my pictures, now we're really getting somewhere.
Yeah,
That
if you're
starts to give me a reason to do it.
if you're going to get a 4K display like soon, as much as I hate the dumb naming convention that they've done, I do have to say that Samsung's SUHD, and they literally have said the S stands for whatever you want it to stand for because it isn't really a thing. But
SUHD, so it's SUD.
SUD. I'm
SUD.
assuming that's Samsung UHD, but I do have to
Yeah.
say, as far as the feature set goes, they appear to me, from a glance, to be probably the best choice because at
That's
least,
good because that's the one I was looking at.
yeah,
But
at
it's
least,
not happening anytime real soon. It's just like if I was gonna, that looks
yeah.
really nice.
They can do pseudo high dynamic range, like they can get they can sort of use it, and they can have their HDCP 2.2, or even get the upgrade because Samsung does that whole thing where the actual jack pack where you plug everything in can be replaced.
Yeah.
So they're kind of the way I would lean, but don't do it. Don't do it this
Yeah.
year. Just don't
Okay.
do it.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
wait.
All right. All
Just
right.
wait.
Right. Right.
Not
Yeah.
only that, it's gonna get
They
cheaper,
make a
man.
nice 1080p that's about 60 inch.
Exactly.
But I'm going to tell you the thing, and I want to maybe I should wait and ask you this because I have my Lee questions,
Yes, yes, yes.
and one of them involves new TVs and viewing angles. So,
Yep. So yeah, on the subwoofer tip, I mean, for that size of room, that STF2 is doing a perfectly fine job, and getting a second one of those, no problem. I mean, I'm never
especially
gonna.
for $365 if you can find
No.
that. Yeah.
I mean, yes, that STF2, it does naturally start to roll off about 28 hertz. It's about 3 decibels quieter at 25 hertz. It maybe doesn't troll the absolute depths below 20 hertz type of thing. So it's conceivable you could get a different subwoofer for more money that could play even lower, but if you're value shopping, man, oh man, is it
Yeah.
hard to beat that STF2.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd lean you that way. All right, I do want to leave time for your questions and topics, Lee. Let's see, how many more do we have? I mean, we got under like 17 this week, so let's try and
Mhm.
at least finish through 10.
Okay. Yeah. However many you want to do, I'm okay.
7 for next week. Tom's gonna kill us already. But anyway, New Michael. I'm calling him New Michael because he discovered AV Rant just a couple of months ago, and
Oh, here we
so
are.
we have
Okay.
several other listeners named Michael. So I'm calling this fellow New Michael. He says it's a shame he discovered us a couple of months ago because he wishes he had started listening to us sooner.
There you go.
Ellipses, dot, 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 ellipses, yay, effect for pause. Um, Anyway, he has a theater area that is 14 feet by 20 feet by 8.5 feet high,
Mhm.
but it's open on the left to a dining room and kitchen, and then it's open on the right to an entrance and a stairway going upstairs.
Well, at least it's open on both sides.
It's open on both sides, yeah. So it's definitely larger than this 14 by 20 by 8.5 that he said at first. Sent us in some photos, which is a huge help, so we can see what we're dealing with. So
Uh-huh. Yeah,
he
yeah.
has a base question. He's got an HSU VTF2 subwoofer right now. It's actually performance-wise, if it's the original VTF2, like I think it is, because he didn't put a mark afterwards, like HSU likes to do. I think they're up to Mark 5 now. But he just mentioned VTF2, so he's got that. He's got several sofas, in fact, sort of arranged in a U shape within that area, so along the left, along the right, and facing the television.
All right, so
And
each sofa is perpendicular to the left-right plane of the home theater,
yes, yep,
and
yep,
it's right in front of each front speaker.
pretty much, yeah. It's not
Uh,
exactly ideal placement, but he's like, I know this isn't perfect, but this is how many people I need to sit,
uh-huh.
seat, and this
I
is
got you.
this is the way it's gonna be. And at least he has space behind that primary seat, so he's not
Yeah.
dealing with that whole thing. He's saying the bass response across all of these seats is very uneven.
Uh,
Not a shock, not a surprise. And so he would very much like to add a second subwoofer. But the thing is, we've been talking about, the best placements are the two subwoofers are across the room from one another at the midpoints of two opposing walls in diagonally opposite corners. He's like, I can't do any of
yeah,
that.
that would be floating in space for him. Yeah, or actually, it
It's
would
gonna
be
be
like a stairwell and the kitchen.
Yeah, it's gonna. One has to go in front of the door, and the other one in the corner of his dining room. One has to go
Yeah.
in front of his refrigerator in the front corner of his theater. One has to go in the middle of a walkway. So he's like, "What am I going to do to try and get more even bass?" Now, I have one suggestion. I don't know if he's going to go for it, but there's one thing that I think is not quite exactly the way he's envisioning it, based on he's saying I could put one sort of in front, behind the left front speaker, and then another one like to the right of the middle sofa or something like that. Try
Say
and
that
get,
again now. Which?
yeah, like behind the left front speaker, and then the other one like to the right of his main sofa. Thinking that
Yeah.
that's sort of a diagonally across.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when he describes that, I think he's envisioning all of this being like the midpoints of his theater, or diagonally across his theater.
Right, but it's the
That's
room that matters.
the room, exactly. It's a really important distinction to make, because the subwoofers, the bass frequencies actually, they have no idea that you've only designated this portion of your room as being the theater area.
That's right.
They don't care. Wherever the air can move, the air will move. They are going into that kitchen and into that dining room. They're going into that entranceway. They're going up the stairwell.
They're going upstairs, yeah.
And basestand waves don't care. They don't know that you've placed these arbitrary limits of where you've outlined your theater designated area. So when we're talking about the midpoints, we're talking about the midpoints of the room. If we're talking about
Mhm.
diagonally opposite corners, we're talking diagonally opposite corners of the room, not just the theater area. So I'm looking at his room, I'm looking
Ooh.
at his pictures. The one thing that occurred to me is, and I don't know if you'd be able to even do this with box subwoofers. So the second part of his question was whether we'd recommend getting a second one of the same HSU subwoofer, like another VTF2, or selling the one he has and getting two other ones.
See, my first reaction is the best you're going to be able to do is two subwoofers that look like end tables at the end of each couch.
That's not a bad suggestion, man.
So that if you're sitting, you could lean over and put a drink on it maybe and watch it vibrate. Because at least then you get some symmetry for most of the seats.
And the two subwoofers are basically in the middle of the room,
Yeah.
symmetrically opposite one another.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion. The only issue there is I think he uses the gap between like where the two subwoofers meet as sort of a walkway to get out.
Well, it looks like soft furniture. Just climb over the back of the recliner.
Or just walk around the outside edges of the you've really sort of enclosed a U shape.
Or just
if
pull,
do it that way.
get first of all, you're going to get a bigger TV.
Yep, there's that.
Okay, and then you can pull your recliners back a little bit farther. You got plenty of space behind those two recliners. So I would go immediately and get a much larger television, another subwoofer, put it at the end of the two couches, pull the recliners back, rock and roll.
Yeah, I honestly I like that suggestion because he does have the opening to the left and the opening to the right, so that gets you fairly symmetrical within the room. And like I've been saying
Mm.
many times, don't worry about this thought that I know enters people's heads, which is if I put the subwoofers physically that close to my seat, it's going to be distracting. I'm going to notice that they're
Mm.
there because they're so close. I promise you, deep bass frequencies don't work that way. That's
No.
just it doesn't happen.
And it's not going to be like what are those things that Tom hates so much that just shake your
Oh
couch?
yeah, oh yeah, tactile transducers, yeah, that you
Yeah,
physically.
those little rump shaker things.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not going to be like that.
Nope,
It's
nope.
just does that look the way you want it to look? And
Right.
you got the kids' toys in the middle of the room. You're not too worried.
That's right. I had one other suggestion though, which was, and like I said, I don't know if this would work with boxes, but looking at his room, if you actually took, basically to the left is the dining room, that's sort of like half of the room,
As you sit in
with,
the recliners.
widthwise, yeah,
Yeah,
widthwise, and then the theater is sort of the other half of the room, widthwise of that entire room. So
approximately, yeah.
right where the theater area joins into the dining room and joins into the
Ah,
kitchen,
yeah.
that is basically the middle of your room.
Yeah, put the one sub there first and see how it sounds. That would be
Yeah.
right next to what amounts to a love seat couch.
Yeah, and it would be,
Yeah.
sort of behind his left front speaker and then over a little bit to more to the left. But, try positioning just the one subwoofer there to begin with, because
Or
that
at the
sort
other end of that love seat, more into the middle of the room.
possibly, yeah. But the
So,
other thing you could do is if that doesn't work, just having the one subwoofer basically in the middle of the front wall of the actual room, not just the theater, I don't know if he'd be able to put another subwoofer at the back,
mhm,
literally directly across from it.
right.
It would be beside his kitchen, and I'm thinking this is where I'm thinking cylinder subwoofers might work better because they're tall, a small footprint, and covered in velour. So, so they're soft and they're kind of
Yeah.
unobtrusive. I don't know. I mean, the wife might just say there is no way I'm putting big black cylinders where they're
Yeah.
very obvious next to the kitchen and next to I mean, literally when you open the entryway, looking straight ahead, you'd be looking at a big tall black cylinder. So,
It'd be right as you walk in the front door, yeah.
so that
If it
really.
was at like so it'd be to either sides of the recliners and yeah, you'd have to walk all the
Yeah.
way around the
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the actual middle of the room at the front wall and the back wall, so essentially beside your kitchen and beside your dining room, it would work acoustically. If you
I,
went with cylinders, it might not block walkways or something too badly because they're a small footprint, but I don't know if that would fly with the aesthetics committee.
I'd like to know if new Michael has done the subwoofer crawl yet with the one he has
Right, right.
and
Right
just
now he has it
start
in the
there.
right now he has it in the front right corner,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is, I mean, he might have done that because if he puts it anywhere else, he just doesn't get enough output because he's dealing with a large space,
It's just sort of as
all
you look at
told.
the room visually, it's the most natural place you want to put it.
Sure,
You hope it
sure.
works in that corner because
Yep.
it's the least obtrusive. But I'd do the crawl first, and I swear it looks to
Yes.
me like if you set it to the next to that smaller love seat couch, that just looks like that'd be a good place for sound. Now, I don't know if that's too ugly for everyone involved or what, but that looks like a good place.
Yep.
And then one other
Yeah.
bit of advice for new Michael, dude, twist ties or zip ties or something. Dude, seriously,
Spaghetti
like
mess.
that thing behind the little entertainment stand,
Spaghetti mess.
that is going to crawl out and eat your child. You need to do something about that.
Or a child is going to call through and eat the cables. That could
Yes, something's going to happen back there. Things are nesting in that. You've got to do something. It's driving me insane.
So Barney found an interesting article. This is from Red. This is like the guys who make the Red cameras.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and it was all about cinema color management. It's quite an in-depth article. If people would like to read through the whole thing, we'll have a link over at avrant.com. But Barney wanted to specifically ask about this DCI P3 color gamut, which is described in detail in the article. And this is the color gamut that is currently being used in basically every theater that you might go to. When you go there, that's the color gamut. And so he would like to know if that's ever going to be available for home users, because right now we're using this Rec 709 for HD TV, and that's described in the article as well. And then the P3 color gamut is quite a bit larger than the Rec 709 gamut. So he's wondering if we'll ever have that at home, and if it does come home, like say in Ultra HD Blu-ray, then would our current projectors and flat panels be able to display it?
Probably not.
Interesting set of questions, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it gives you a benefit, if it actually looks better,
Mm-hmm.
Or if companies think we will buy it because it's there, then yes, you will
Mm-hmm.
see it. Uh, I would be excited about that. I know what color gamut is as someone who takes photos and has
Yes.
printed photos. I don't know the specifics of that one though. But
Yeah, well,
I like the idea of wider color gamuts for
yeah,
sure.
as far as a photographer, you're probably familiar with Adobe RGB
Yes,
as a
yes.
color gamut. So P3 is similar in total scope in terms
Hmm.
of like the number of shades of colors that it encompasses. It's similar to Adobe RGB, but the exact points of red, green, and blue are not identical to Adobe RGB. So
Hmm.
it's a similarly sized gamut, but it is not the same gamut.
Makes me wonder why Adobe RGB, which is already there and has been there forever, wouldn't be the next standard. I wonder
Well,
why
because
that's
Adobe
not.
RGB is related to print, and of course, print has
Hmm.
to get turned into CMYK, right?
Right.
Because we have to translate light into pigment. And
Hmm.
so Adobe RGB was developed so that it would be more accurate, so that what you see on the screen is what ultimately ends up being printed out.
Right. See, transferring to print, I have a guy for that.
Yep.
I had a friend of mine
It's
I went to
not.
high school with. He owns a photo store. He has a big, giant $250,000 printer. He does CMYK. I just take him files and
Yep.
go, I need these to look beautiful for a customer. Thank you.
So that's
Done.
that's sort of the reason why they're different, but they're similar in total size, those two.
Hmm.
So the thing is, will we get this P3 color gamut at home? Gosh, do I ever hope so?
Hmm.
Because the thing is, Ultra HD 4K, however we're going to call it, the official color gamut that they have specified now is this Rec 2020. And in fact, Barney asks about that too. He wants to know if we'll ever actually see Rec 2020 content and displays that can do the whole thing. So Rec 2020 is an enormous gamut. It's much larger than anything we've had before.
Well, that brings up the question, what are we not seeing right now on my HD TV? If I get a brand new HD TV, just
Yep.
a 1080p HD TV, and I watch, a broadcast HD TV signal or a Blu-ray,
Yep.
what colors are not there?
Well, I can tell you Scott Wilkinson's favorite example from Home Theater Geeks. You cannot see the actual color of a Coca-Cola can on your HD TV.
What?
That exact shade of red cannot be reproduced by an HD TV using the Rec 709 color gamut.
And you know
You
what? I bet there's a team of guys at Coca-Cola that know that and that fight with that every commercial they ever make. And when they print, oh, I bet it drives some guys at Coke crazy. There must be
Yeah.
a PR firm that's just like, I hate that.
The color
They know
correction.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. You cannot see actual neon lights. Neon lights, if you're, shooting a video of Las Vegas or something like that, neon
Yeah.
lights cannot be reproduced.
That is for
In the
sure. That's been the case on camcorders for ages. I can tell you that.
Exactly.
And you can't even quite get them just right on a high-end digital SLR either.
Yeah, that's right.
They always have some weird smear to them, and the color is always a little bit off. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are things that we can see every day in real life. These are not incredibly strange things that just
Yeah.
cannot be reproduced on our
There
current
are
HDTV.
flowers in my yard on
Yep.
some azaleas that are these purplish color, purpley
Mm-hmm.
red,
Mm-hmm.
and no picture I've ever taken of them
Yep.
look exactly like they look to your eyeball.
Yep.
So I guess those super rich, intense
Yeah.
colors just aren't
Very,
quite there.
saturated in terms of what our eyes can actually detect type of colors.
Well,
Those
then I
things.
want that. I want that now. I hate
Yeah.
that that's
So
not there.
and that's what BT 2020, that's what Rec 2020 aims to try and encompass. I
Yeah,
mean, it
that'll
throws
happen.
it throws the color points really out as far as they can go. Now, there's the issue with Rec 2020. The issue with Rec 2020 is that they have specified extremely tiny nanometer, right down to the nanometer wavelengths of red, green, and blue.
Hmm.
That basically means only lasers can reproduce exactly the BT 2020 gamut.
So there's no phosphor that can glow the right color?
Not really.
Wow.
No, I mean it's really just lasers that can do it. So they're hoping that quantum dots will be able to reproduce it. They can't at the moment. Theoretically, there's no reason why quantum dots couldn't be able to do it, but right now they just don't exist that way. So really, it's lasers.
So no OLED can glow the right color.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
And
that may
the
be
other,
getting out ahead of things then.
and the other issue with 2020, if you really want to actually nail that entire gamut, the other issue is that because the exact color points of red, green, and blue are so specific down to the exact nanometer, you actually run into a biological issue. they've talked about this on Home Theater Geeks as well, but you run into a biological issue, which is that by and large, those of us who do not have some flaw in our color vision, if we're not colorblind in some way, we do see largely the same colors. But the way our vision actually works, we have red, green, and blue cones in our eyes,
Right.
but they don't respond to only one specific nanometer exactly
That's
color.
right.
They
Yeah.
respond to a whole arc, and they
Mm.
overlap. And that's in fact how we detect something like yellow light. Yellow light has a specific wavelength, but when it hits our eye, it stimulates both the red and green cones.
Hmm.
And the relative amount of stimulation between our red and green cones, our brain decodes that and says, oh, that's yellow.
Hmm.
That's how our vision system works. But when you end up with really, really specific red, green, and blue,
Yeah.
different people's cones will not all respond exactly the same. There's a little bit of
Dude,
wiggle room.
are you actually scientifically explaining how the same color doesn't look the same to you and me?
Yup.
Are you just
It's called
are you just
metamerism.
blowing my mind and I'm not high on anything?
No, it's called metamerism, and what happens is, very,
Dude.
very, your eye might respond the most, it might be stimulated the most by, one cone might be 468 nanometers. That's what it is. And mine is 469. Like it's off by 1 nanometer, right?
By the
So
way, I hope we're getting somewhere close to the end of a podcast.
We
There's
are.
this little dog next to me, and this little dog has got that look of.
oh, I see. Time to get going. Well, okay.
So you said we were going to try to get through 10.
Yep, and this is
That's
it.
pretty good.
Yep, this is it. So because of that, Rec 2020 is a little bit of a potential issue because not everyone might be seeing the exact same colors, meaning that the person who produced the image might not be what you ultimately end up seeing. So I'm really, really hoping that P3, DCI P3 is what we settle on. Now, there's no reason why you can't encode P3 colors within a 2020 gamut. You just won't be using the entire 2020 gamut. That's all.
But certainly some wider color gamut's coming because
Yes.
we can see it.
Yes.
We're currently not getting it on our televisions. Why
in
wouldn't we
fact-
want that?
in
And
fact,
that's
the
like
UHD
sounds like something they could sell more TVs with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the UHD Alliance has said, they want P3 to be the color gamut that they use. I mean, it only makes sense because everything they've already archived, everything they've ever digitized from the original film prints and everything, it was all done in the P3 color gamut. So tons and tons of content exists.
Perfect. Yeah. Well,
So-
that makes sense. That's coming.
Yeah.
That's just that has to
That
happen.
is coming, and BT 2020, it might be coming. It'll have to be lasers or quantum dots that do it. It might be coming. I kind of hope it doesn't because it goes a little bit too far.
But oh Lord, please don't let there be a color gamut format war.
I don't
Certainly
think so.
not. Someone's
I don't
going to
think
pick
so.
that for Blu-ray, and that'll be the end of it.
I'm pretty sure they'll settle on P3 and we'll be good to go. Will that work on our current displays? Nope, won't work.
No, forget it.
even the displays, like I know some of the Panasonic Plasmas, they claim that they can produce 98% of the DCI P3 color gamut, except that you don't have the capability of accepting the signal.
There's no input for
There's
it.
that little issue there.
No,
So-
maybe maybe one of those Samsungs with the things you can swap out.
Yes. Yep. Perhaps because some of those you can even switch the video processing.
What you were
to.
talking about earlier. Okay.
Part of
Right.
that pack, yeah. So, will we see it? Yes. Will it work on current projectors and flat panels? No, unless they have some way of having their video processing updated and the panel is already capable of producing those colors, which some of them are.
And don't wait for that to buy a new TV. You're going to be waiting too long.
Well, I mean, if you need a TV right now, I suppose, but if you actually want it, I would suggest waiting.
Yeah, but like it sounds to me like they're not going to sort that out real soon.
it's going to be at least about a year.
Okay. All right. Right.
I'm saying like Christmas 2016, I think will be a good time to start buying stuff.
Okay.
So, all right, we finished 10. We've got 7 left to go. I'll quickly mention the names. We've got Bill, we've got Andy, we've got Romeo, we've got Michael M, we've got Carl, we've got Eliezer, and we've got J. Rod. Well, I do have your questions. I know someone else just wrote to us like as we were during the podcast, so that question's in there too. Don't worry, we have them. If you didn't hear your name amongst those, then feel free to send the question again.
And my questions can wait. I'll just tell you now.
Are you
I've got.
sure?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good because I'm not
I'm
buying a
sorry,
TV real
dude.
soon. But what I want to know about, and this will give you a chance to think about it, is the best wide angle LCD television. There's
Oh,
something called an IPS style monitor that
there
computer
is.
monitors have,
Yeah.
and so far I can only see LG mentioning that. And I want to
Yeah.
know, does anyone else? Because I'm not crazy about LG, but they're fine. But because I have a room that's quite a bit wider than it is deep, and I
Right.
got some seats off to the side. I'd like to preserve as
Yeah.
much of the viewing angle as I have now with the plasma. So that's a thought for the future. That's
That's a
my
that's a, that's a real challenge because the IPS panels you tend to not get as deep black levels, which is why they use the VA, the vertically aligned panels. They get you the deeper black levels, but then they don't have as good off-axis viewing.
right.
So there is that trade-off. It's you might need to look at OLED, man. You
Oh,
might need
good
to
Lord.
look at
I don't know if I
OLED.
can wait that long and afford that. Lord God, dude. Yeah, we blew a lot of money about 10 years ago on the plasma that's in there now. We're not going to quite
Yep.
go that that route with that much money, so there may have to be an interim television, but we'll see. Anyway, we can all look that up for next
See,
time
I
with
went
you
and
guys.
promised, I went and teased for people that we would have your questions at the end. So I'll
That's okay.
call that it.
I have
That
little
was it.
tiny
That's as far
questions.
as we got.
I had I've got like cute story about installing a car stereo in my wife's car.
I
I got a
see.
little question about a little passive sub I hooked up in my office here. Little things. It's no big
Ah,
deal. So we can talk about it later. It's all good. And also I'd like to talk more about building your DIY speakers and converting
all right.
old things like we briefly talked about. So that can happen later. That's okay. That's a teaser for a future episode. These are the kinds of things
Oh, okay.
coming.
Look at that. Well, we turned ourselves into a liar, but that's because your dog has to go, so that is fine. We need to go too. I will
Actually, he's being pretty good. He's like really cool right now, so he's not dying. Everything's good, but
I
maybe it's
will
about
thank our
time.
listeners of the week. Michael R. Thank you very much for your donation. Thank you to Everett. Thank you to Andy. Thank you to Carl E. I'm sorry we didn't get to some of those questions, but we will get to them next week, and hopefully Tom will have internet back by then. Hopefully he has survived
Maybe
this.
Florida will be working next week.
That's right. Maybe it will. Maybe they'll have dock workers back on the West Coast next week. Man, oh man, what a story
Wow.
over there. In case you can't get your new gear, that's where it is. It's floating off the West Coast. So,
Oh,
lovely fun happening over there over the weekend. But anyway, that's what we'll call a podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Lee, thank you so much for being here and filling in on last
man,
minute
no
notice.
problem. I love
Very
it.
kind of you.
I wish I could be more useful, but my only research was cooking catfish sandwiches. So that's all I had time for.
You did just fine. I am very sure everyone enjoyed it. Thank you to the folks who've watched. I don't think we'll be doing a hangout after the show. I need to get up early. Lee needs to go walk his dog. So, for AV Rant, for Tom Andrew, who was not here, very sorry you couldn't be here, Tom. I am Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now
Now
go
go
listen to
and
something.
listen to something. We said it
Yeah.
together. Yay!
Yay!
Right. Bye bye, everyone. Okay, folks, thank you so much for watching along with us. I'm sorry I won't be hosting a hangout tonight in Tom's absence and needing to get going, get up early, and get these things edited and sent off to Tom. That's how it's going to be this week. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. Bye bye.